Shalom, greetings, Reb Brian Yosef here. This video is on the teaching about how intense suffering and tragedy can actually lead one to an awakened state, to the spaciousness and freedom of the present moment. But you don't need to wait for intense suffering in order to awaken into the present. And this teaching can help you do that. But first, if you'll do me the favor of clicking like and subscribing to the channel, that will help me out a lot in being able to make more content like this. Okay, on with the teaching. So Jacob leaves his hometown of Be'er Sheva and returns to Haran. On the way, he stops to sleep and dreams of a ladder spanning earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending upon it. In the morning, Jacob raises the stone upon which he laid his head as an altar and a monument, pledging that it will one day become a house of God. Okay, here's the verse and part of another verse that we're looking at. Vayetzei Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. Jacob went out from Be'er Sheva and walked toward Haran. This is right in the beginning of the parsha when he's running away from his brother. Then it says, Vayifga bamakom. He encountered the place. We'll look more at that later, but first, a little story, which is a true story. Usually at this point I put a Hasidic story in here, but this is a story that happened to me. Once when I was flying, the plane started lurching violently. It felt like the plane was hitting huge potholes in the sky. The captain asked the flight attendants to have a seat, as the guy next to me gasped when his tablet device literally flew out of his hands up into the air. After a few minutes of this, a thought occurred to me. I didn't have time to finish davening that morning. So I reached for my siddur and I began the morning prayers. Immediately, the turbulence died down. Did the davening cause the turbulence to stop? Was this testimony to the power of prayer? The mind loves this kind of question. Some will say, see the power of prayer at work. Others will be skeptical. The turbulence would have stopped anyway, but because you started praying at that time, your mind makes a correlation where there was none. This is the dualistic mind. It's either one or it's the other. But there is a third way, which is to see that all events are part of a single reality. This one reality is the turbulence, this one reality is the prayer, and this one reality is the ending of the turbulence. It's not three things. It's not me stopping the turbulence with prayers. There is only one continuous event, one reality unfolding in time. Seen in that way, the prayers could even be taken right out of the equation. There was turbulence. It stopped. Isn't that miracle enough? I was thrown out of my seat. That reminded me to pray. Isn't that miracle enough? One thing is for sure. In that moment, when the turbulence subsided as I chanted the prayers, that moment was all there was. Vayifga bamakom. He encountered the place. It's a strange sentence talking about Jacob here, where he stopped for the night. He encountered the place, bamakom. But the word for the place, hamakom, is actually one of the Hebrew names for God. By calling God the place, the text is giving us a hint about where God can be found. For Jacob, the place was between the home he had left behind and the new home he was going to. Meaning, between the past and the future, he encountered God. Where is this special place between the past and the future that we can encounter God? The place, of course, is always here where we already are. And yet, the mind tends to see this place as insignificant compared to our imagined past and future. After all, our past is our story, our identity, and our future is our desire, our goal. Past and future are important, but when past and future become more important than the present, meaning when imagination becomes more important than reality, This creates a feeling of being disconnected from reality, of being disconnected from this place, from this moment. And when disconnectedness dominates one's life and the alienation becomes more and more painful, one can reach a point where something has to shift. That's what happened to Jacob. His origin and his goal became so heavy that for an instant he was able to pop out of the story and see the moment. So what was the story? The story was that he had tricked and cheated his brother Esau out of his birthright and blessing. He had missed the presence of his brother as a living being and instead saw him as a stepping stone towards his own later success. His imagined future obscured the reality of his present. And what about his actual future? He ended up with his scoundrel uncle Lavan, who returned Jacob's trickery by manipulating him into working for 14 years in order to marry his daughter Rachel, while fooling him into marrying Leah as well. Rachel ends up dying when the whole family flees after the brothers Shimon and Levi murder all the males of an entire city in order to avenge their sister, who had been violated by just one male. Later, their beloved son Joseph is sold into slavery by his other brothers who are jealous of him. Not a happy story. Furthermore, his uncle Lavan and future wives live in Haran, the place where his grandfather Avraham came from. So Jacob's future is also in a sense his past. And the place he is coming from, Be'er Sheva, is the land his descendants are destined to live. So his past is really also his future. In other words, his past and future are identical and therefore hopeless, because the future is just a perpetuation of dysfunctional patterns from the past. And amazingly, those patterns continue to survive in the Holy Land today in the perpetual violent conflicts between the descendants of Abraham. But in the life of a person, there comes a time when the whole burden of past and future becomes too great, and in one's despair, the whole thing collapses. This is the moment Jacob has come to. Vayelin sham kiva hashemesh, and he spent the night there because the sun had set. The setting of the sun is a symbol of his inner darkness. Jacob is in despair over his situation. So what does he do? Vayikach me avnei hamakom, he took from the stones of the place, Vayasem mirashotav, and he placed them for his head. It sounds like he's using stones for a pillow. Would you want to use a pillow? Would you want a pillow made of stones? Wouldn't stones make absolutely the worst pillow? When we see absurdities like this in the text, they hint that something deeper is going on. What are the qualities of stones? They are dense, they are heavy, they don't blow around, but are still. A person's head, on the other hand, is the place where thought happens. Thought is perhaps the least physical thing in our experience. Rather than being still, it constantly bubbles this way and that. So bringing stones to his head hints at a radical shift in consciousness. His mind is becoming quiet. Before Jacob encountered the place, his journey had no significance of its own. It was merely the space between his origin and his goal. But now that Jacob is beginning to despair, he is letting go of his story and time. He is giving up hope. And in this giving up, he is beginning to notice the place he is in. He is bringing his mind all the way down to the stones and becoming still. Vayachalom, he dreamed, Vehine sulam mutzav arza, v'rosho magia hashamayma. Behold, a ladder was set on the ground, and its top reached the heavens. Vehine, behold, check it out, Malachei Elohim, angels of Elohim, olim v'yordim bo, were going up and down upon it. There is a tradition that everything has an angel or a spiritual force causing it. So according to this idea, everything we experience is determined in the spiritual realm, and we really have nothing to do with it. The Talmud says everything is in the hands of heaven except the awe of heaven. In other words, everything that happens is predetermined except our relationship to it. Other than that, we have no real power. Seen from this point of view, the angels descending the ladder would be the determining forces for what goes on in our world. However, there's another opposing idea that every deed a person does actually creates an angel. Do a good deed, create good angels. Do bad, create bad angels. These created angels then go around producing good or bad effects in the world. So in this view, what happens is not determined by the angels, but by human beings creating the angels. In other words, everything is in our hands. This view is represented by the angels ascending the ladder. But in Jacob's vision, there are angels going up the ladder and down the ladder. He sees the paradox of both realities at once. Everything is determined by forces which are created by our actions, and yet our actions are themselves determined by forces, which are themselves created by our actions, and so on ad infinitum. And that is the reality of Hamakom, this place we have just now come to. If we wish to encounter Hamakom, the divine reality of this moment, we have to surrender our preoccupation with the way things come out. We have to give up control. This is the meaning of the angels coming down. Everything is in the hands of heaven. At the same time, this supreme surrender actually frees us from our automatic responses to things. In that surrender, no longer must we be victims of our own preferences. We have choice. So the next time you get annoyed with a loved one and you feel yourself going into your same old response, stop. Surrender. Access that power of transformation, the power that allows you to choose how to be. This is the meaning of the angels going up, our choice to be in awe of heaven. That is, to realize our tremendous potential for co-creating reality. When we see both the ascending and descending angels at once, meaning when we both surrender and take responsibility, we can realize, like Jacob did, Achein yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. Surely the divine is present in this place, and I didn't even know it. This is represented by the sphera of Malchut, the presence that is ever present, that which we call the divine in the world. Jacob's newfound freedom is summed up a few verses later. Vayisa Yaakov raglav, vayelech. Jacob lifted up his feet and went. It is as if he is now flying, his feet in the air. In this week of Shabbat Vayetzei, the Sabbath of going out, may we all remember to frequently go out from our stories in time to meet Malchut, also called Shekhinah, the presence, which is the timeless, that glows softly within all things. And that's the idea. It's not to say that that we are doomed, that the past and that the future is hopeless, but rather to say that it's hopeless when we're stuck in it, and we can connect again and again with that freedom from time, freedom from the unconscious forces that will perpetuate themselves if we don't wake up and make a different choice, and also accept the world as it is arising right now. And so that's what we're coming together to do. This is the chant from Malchut that comes from Adon Olam, the hymn. Biyado afkid ruchi be'eti shan va'ira. Into the hand of the divine I entrust my spirit at the time of sleep, and I awaken. On the plain level, it's talking about waking up in the morning after going to sleep. But on the deeper level, we can recognize any moment that we are asleep, that we're experiencing unconsciousness, resistance, fear, negativity, wishing things were otherwise. That's called being asleep. So we can trust that it's okay, that that's our state in the moment, ve'a'ira, and that itself is an awakening. Ve'im ruchi geviati, the divine is with me. This consciousness that we are waking up and beholding this moment as it is not just with us, but is incarnated as us. Velo ira, and then we can release fear. We don't have to fear anything when we're doing this. And so let's do it. Biyado afkid ruchi be'et ishan ve'ayira ve'im ruchi Viati Hashem li velo ira biyado afkid ruchi be'et ishan Hashem li velo ira biyado afkid ruchi be'et ishan ve'ayira ve'im ruchi Viati Hashem li velo ira biyado afkid ruchi be'et ishan Geviati Hashem li velo ira. I hope you enjoyed this week's Torah of Awakening. Before you go, if you would just give a like and subscribe to the channel, that helps me to put out more content like this, and I look forward to being with you next time. All blessings.
Schachter-Brooks